I got interrupted by my other daughter. Anyway, so she had a hard time. The first they did the operation, which was very successful. However, it took her a lot longer than normal. Let's put it that way. A lot of babies are in and out of there in 3 weeks. It took her a lot longer. First, the bile wasn't like working, and she was having like her heart. They had to put her on. She had a lot of breathing issues, which which was not necessarily related to this, but she wasn't able to keep her breath. This is also because she was premature, and even though they gave her the steroids, apparently she was little. I think my babies need to be a little bit late. So she had some like breathing issues. She had to be there for longer than they would have expected. Let's put it that way. One thing I did learn is that after she was, they were doing the IV thing for her. She was so tiny and everything, and the nurses were really nice. But finally, like after, I think it was 2 weeks, that she was able to start getting some nutrition in her stomach. Like they had a tube down her stomach. They had a tube in her, she was all hooked up. It was so sad. I would carry her, and she was just all hooked up. And she really did want to be with me. And again, this is another thing. If you have other kids, oh my God, people were like, you have to be there with your daughter the whole time. And I couldn't, because I had other little kids. Like, I couldn't just like leave them. My husband got some time off work and he was there, but it was an hour and a half away. And I would try to see her every single day, but sometimes I couldn't. And in the middle of this whole thing, I had a blood clot, which is another time that I'm saying, holler if you feel something is wrong. My leg was hurting, and then my leg was a little swollen. And I was like, so I called my OBGYNs again, and they're like, nah, nothing's wrong. That's fine. It's just your hormones. I got a fever. They're like, oh, it's a hormonal fever. I'm like, really? And I saw this doctor in demand. He's like, you need to go to the ER because you might have a blood clot. So I went, and they're like, oh, she's fine, because I wasn't exaggerated. They're like, can you walk? I'm like, I can walk with pain, but I can walk. And I was like, well, I guess I'm okay. And they're like, yeah, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just hormones. Your muscles are getting back into whatever after the baby, and you're probably emotional and stuff like that. It's a load of crap whenever they tell you that you're just emotional. It's a load of crap. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm okay. And then my leg was just swollen. I felt very odd. It was just so weird. I wasn't feeling like my leg. I'm like, it just hurts me when I walk. It's just very weird, and it's starting to hurt me more and more. I feel like something is constricting my leg. Anyway, finally, I went for I think it was the third time to the OB, and I said, something is wrong with my leg. And they're like, maybe you need to go see a neurosurgeon. A neurologist. I'm like, why would I see a neurologist on my leg? They're like, I don't think your leg doesn't look that swollen to me. And I'm like, again, I wasn't overweight at all. I was kind of maybe a little underweight, so it didn't look like this huge leg. But I'm like, look at it compared to the other one. And they're like, no, I think it's fine. Maybe you should see a vascular doctor, just to make sure, or maybe a neurologist. I'm like, why would I see a neurologist? Anyway, I went to go see this vascular doctor, which saved my life. I went there, and he was this very slow-moving man. Anyway, I was like, this guy's going to drive me crazy. I just wanted to get to the hospital and go and be with my baby. And here he was, like, taking a long time. He got his little camera with his little ultrasound thing. He's like, you have a huge clot. You need to go there, and you need to tell them that they need to immediately do surgery on you to remove this clot. He's like, it is a huge clot. I had a huge clot. The doctor's like, I don't know when I've seen such a big clot before, and an old clot. They did a whole thing, and of course I got to the hospital, and they had said, oh, nothing is wrong with you. And I'm like, clearly there's something. I had a huge clot, and it was on the move. So this doctor really did save my life. Anyways, I was in the intensive care for a few days. There's all kinds of things. I was pumping, and I was in the intensive care, so I was lying down. I was all drugged up because, I had to be completely immobile for 24 hours. Completely. I could not move anything because of the blood clot thing. They had put something inside to drain it. Anyway, it's another story. So that was emotional because I was pumping all the time for my baby to keep a storage of milk for her. all that to say, my baby is now completely fine. She is completely fine. She is extremely, extremely intelligent. She has nothing wrong with her stomach. She has a little scar which you can barely see. And she fought so much for her life in the beginning to the end. She would do this breathing sound like Darth Vader. I was like, what is that there? And I later found out that because she was intubated for so long and they took it out and they had to intubate her again, she had a cyst in her throat. And I was in the ambulance with her. I was in the emergency. I was hospitalized with her. She was like, again, turning blue and purple because she couldn't breathe. This is when she was over a year old. And I was terrified. Every time she would get sick, I was terrified. She would get the slightest cold and she would start being unable to breathe. And of course, people were like, I had the best pediatrician who really took me seriously. And they're like, I don't hear anything in her lungs. And she seems like, maybe she's just like a happy, stridor. I'm like, no, it's not a happy stridor. I would put her on the phone. They're like, take her to the emergency. Anyways, I must have been in the emergency like 10 times with her. Finally, the last time, they're like, she needs to be hospitalized. And they did a thing. And what it was is she had a cyst in her throat from being intubated for so long. So they popped the cyst and everything was fine. She's completely fine now. She is completely fine. All this to say that it's very scary news when you hear that your daughter has this, especially something like that. However, I had mine. She has not. I had every single possible test done on her. She has no Down syndrome whatsoever. Not that that would be a bad thing, but just they're not always associated. I don't know why it happened. I thought, wow, my God, I had such a rough pregnancy, but it has nothing to do with that. And she's completely fine now. The hospital thing was rough, and one thing I did learn is that they were trying to give her the bottle, and she wouldn't be able to keep much down. And I was like, I think she just needs to nurse. So finally, I just had her, and I insisted she just needs to nurse. And we're not sure if she's going to get enough nutrition. She's not gaining the weight that she needs to gain. And everything is just like, oh my God, you're just like, please just gain weight. I want to take you home. Like, we might have to send her home with a tube down her nose so she can be fed. And I'm like, no, she doesn't. She pulled the tube out. She was super feisty. She pulled the tube out. She was like, I'm not doing that. So I said, let me nurse her. Let me stay here. I stayed there for one day. And I said, let me nurse her. And I would weigh her after each nurse, and she nursed way more than she would ever take in the bottle. The bottle, she was like, 2 ounces, if even. She was like nursing 4 ounces at a time, and then nursing again. I'm like, oh my God, she spit up a few times. I got scared, but I was like, no, it's okay. Then we just nurse again. Let her nurse, and they let her out the next day. I was so happy when I took her home, and of course I was worried about her every second. I took her to the pediatrician, like I think if it was supposed to be once every 2 days. I took her every other day for like 2 weeks. Like, I'm so sorry. Anything that happens, is she gaining weight? Is she doing this? Is she doing that? There was a few dips. Like at first, she didn't gain weight for a few days, and I was just beside myself. And then after that, she gained weight. She was the chubbiest little baby ever. She was the chubbiest little baby ever. She was so chunky and lively. I had them come and assess her just to make sure that she was developing, and they were like, there is just no concerns whatsoever here with this child. And my other kids walked like at 9 months and 10 months, I think. She walked at 14 months, I think. I think she walked at 13. I think she walked at 13 months. So a little bit later, but she was also, she was like 2 months. She was 6 weeks early. And probably with my baby, she was like 7 weeks early. So, and now she runs. She's the most athletic one. I think if any of my kids are going to go to college on a athletic scholarship, it's going to be her. So, anyway, if you're watching this and if it's a help, I really understand you, but like, if that's the only issue that she has, your child will be completely fine. And I'm happy to answer any questions, any more details. I was very interested in how long, what were they waiting for it to happen? What were they waiting to happen? And what, this, that, and the other. And I'm happy to answer any of those questions. I also don't want to make this 3 hours long instead of 10, 12 minutes long.